I want to talk now about something that I have been seeing in the air. It is like if you look at the space between yourself and an object, but don't look at the object, and squint your eyes, and the sun has to be shining pretty much into the room, or outside if you're outside, you can see these little gossamer-like waves and lines and zigzags, and I'll show you a picture of what some of them look like. Okay, this picture shows what they look like, and it's just an approximation because they look so many different ways. It's impossible for me to draw all the different ways they look. And they're at different levels. They look like they're on, like the onion skin has many levels, and they're like each one floating in a little area like they were part of an onion skin, and each group of things floating in that level don't interfere with something floating in another level, and may be moving in a direction quite different from what's in some other level. And there seems to be a depth of them that is just incomprehensible how many layers of this there are. It's really hard to keep a good view of them because I have to squint my eyes a certain way in order to see these. But every day I can see them, and in any day that the sun is shining in my window, I see them in my room. If the sun's not on, the light will make them appear around the light where it's brightest. It was after I had noticed these for several days that one afternoon I found myself in the car waiting on my grandkids, and I was looking out at the sun getting pretty low in the sky, and I squinted my eyes the same way I did when I see these things at the sun, and I could cause my eye to make the sun make a big bubble-like roundness, and inside that it was like I was looking through a microscope, only my eyes were the microscope, and I could see all these kind of things that I had been seeing less plainly. I could see them like magnified, and they look sort of like this picture here, which is like, again, just an approximation because there are so many levels of this. Actually, the background of all these little things was frosty with a kind of a frosted imprint, like it were layer upon layer of these things in the background. And it was just amazing. I mean, I'm thinking, what am I seeing here? And my eye controlled how I would see it. Every time I blink my eye, which you can't hold your eye steady for very long, and when I moved my eye the slightest bit, other things would happen to this bubble. Here is a picture. I'm keeping a record of all this in my notebook. I tried to draw how it looks coming up from the sun, sort of like one of those satellite dishes. But then the bubble just separates from the sun. You don't see the sun anymore. You just see the roundness of it. And that roundness, according to how your eye moves, flips around. It can flip like in half. It can look like almost like a taco folded over on its side, and it can roll up like a scroll, and it can flip in such a way that the edges of it sort of square and fan out. And the only thing I noticed that it wouldn't do is like in the picture at the very end on this page, it doesn't flip over from an up and down position, but always vertical. But it's just amazing that I was seeing this, and each time it did this, all of those little things, I don't show them in these drawings, but all of those little segments of things would be in it. And you could see they were in a very thin looking, pancake-like thin substance. And I started calling it the sun amoeba. I was even trying to make a example of what it looked like. So I used some clay and made this little object. And you can see the frostiness of it in this better, and how every line in it was like written with white. And it was, and all the things in it moved constantly. And even there were these little bubble-like things that would come up and move rather fast through the whole thing and then pop. I mean, I didn't hear them pop, but they looked like the effervescence of a Coke, you know, the little bubbles of gas coming to the top of the Coke and then busting. There was a lot of that kind of activity in it. Here's another one that I made where I showed how it folds. It folds in half, and it folds all kinds of ways. So I've just been observing the sun, because I don't know what this means. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just something particular to me. I know it's not really out there. It's within my own self. I mean, when I put my hand out and I see these little things in the air, my hand moves right through it, and it doesn't affect it. They'll just be on my hand until I move my hand to my face close enough that I've touched myself, and then I quit seeing them. One time when I was looking at the sun this way, it started having all these colors. They're not exactly like the colors you see here. They were more or less mother of pearl looking colors of the rainbow. And they were just swirling around like a huge vortex. The edges were like constantly being added to, and in the center it was constantly being sucked into like a vortex hole. And it just was fascinating. I only saw it do that one time. I've looked at the sun many times since then, and I haven't seen it do that. But that was particularly interesting, that it made a vortex that was moving from the right to the left. It was a few days later that I observed this when I looked at this sun sail. And now this, I call it the sun sail. It's easier for me to say that. But this particular day, it seemed as if a colorful protrusion of a sort was moving in at the upper right side of it. It was sort of like being penetrated by this thing that looked to me like a sperm entering into an egg. And I thought, wow, now that's interesting. But again, like the time that it swirled and made the vortex, I've only seen this one time. I haven't seen it again. But I keep looking every day. And I'll show you next what happened. Next, what happened was that one day I looked at it. Again, this is something I haven't seen but one time. And the little sun sail did this. It made two of itself. And you could see, I don't show in this picture, but you could still see all those little segments of light, but behind them were rainbow-colored, moving colors. And I show them more or less in this picture, but there were also those little segments, which another thing these segments do is they go out from this too, out from around the roundness of it, like out beyond it, and then they get less easily seen. They're smaller. It's as if they're in the sun's glow, they're big. In this picture I show how they come out from the perimeter of this bubble. By the way, this bubble is very hard to remain focused on because it's always doing that thing where it flips on its side all kinds of ways or rolls up like a scroll. So I have to train my eyes to look at it and maintain a certain kind of focus to keep it where it's bubbled out like a perfect round circle. And then I can see the things inside more easily, which are constantly moving. It's really very hard to see and very hard to portray here. This is not at all everything that I can see, but it's the best approximation I can make. Anyway, I'm going to talk about this in from what I've read in books about what it is I may be seeing in my next segment.